All right, Pete. Should we move on to a couple more topics and then kind of get out of here?
Let's do it.
All right. Let's talk about. Hmm. Hmm.
Sure, we should probably talk some contracts. I feel like a lot
Yeah.
of contracts have happened in the last few days.
Yeah. Let's talk some contracts. I know Lillard signed one. Harden signed one. The center from the Blazers, I think.
Nurkic, yeah.
Nurkic also signed a big one. Frank Kaminsky obviously signed a big contract with the Hawks.
Yeah,
Tom,
relatively speaking.
yeah.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Lillard because I think that's the one that I think a lot of people are surprised about.
Oh, see,
So
I would have said Harden, but let's go with Lillard first, and then we'll move over to Harden. Harden
yeah.
to me is the more interesting one, but I'm interested to hear about this Lillard one.
Okay. So this is of course coming from Shams of the Athletic. Damian Lillard and the Portland Trailblazers have agreed to a 2-year, $120 million extension. Lillard now has 5 seasons and nearly $270 million on his current contract. Lillard would earn $63 million in 2027.
Ooh! Good luck building the team with that. I'm interested to see what that Portland Trailblazers team is going to look like.
Yeah,
Th-
I think.
There, that is
Yeah, go
no
ahead.
shade at Damian Lillard. That's no shade at Damian Lillard. He earned every dollar of that, in my opinion. If you're hometown grown, and I know that he's not from Portland, but I mean just in terms of his NBA career hometown,
Hmm.
right? Like this is the type of contract in the rewarding that more teams need to do. You know, this is the only way to keep guys like Damian Lillard in small market towns like Portland, right? Like you have
Hmm.
to drop the ultimate primo bag on these guys, like to get them to stay. That is a number that they have to pray that the cap space just keeps exploding in the NBA, which by all accounts it will. Once the TV rights deals and the bargaining agreements go through, cap is supposed to go way up, right? So
Hmm.
hopefully for their sake that is the case. That is the type of contract that is absolutely crippling to any hopes of winning any title. Like in my
Yeah.
in my estimation at least, like that is way too much money for a single player to make. Um, Even Dame in 2027 with he's one of the toughest players in the league. Obviously, he played through that abdominal injury, I believe it was that he just got surgery on. I think he played through that for like 4 seasons. He said
Mhm.
that's wild, but I don't know. I would be scared of giving just about any player ever $63 million in one season.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those situations. We look at the extension. I don't think it goes until actually I think it's active right now. I mean, if we look at it, I mean Damian Lillard is 25% of the cap already, and so the rest of the 75%, you got to kind of space it out between a couple of guys. I mean, we got Yusuf Nurkic, earning 70 million in cash remaining guaranteed. You got Anthony Simons again signed $100 million contract, so that's good for them. You bring in Jeremy Grant via trade. He's still on that big contract that the Pistons gave him, and
Can
now
I
you
ask you a
just
question
yeah, go
with
ahead.
Dame? Where would you rank Dame? I think this is an interesting question. You could tell me if I'm crazy or not. Where would you rank Dame in terms of the players with the most power within their franchise?
Uh I mean he's definitely
Because
up there.
I would say after this offseason, with this in consideration as well, I mean he's got to be top five. Like he has to be. By all accounts, he was the one that asked for Jeremy Grant, right?
Yep.
Like that's what I've heard. He almost kind of alluded to it. I saw an interview he did at Summer League. I think it might have been
Hmm.
yesterday or 2 days ago, where he was talking about playing with Jeremy Grant on Team USA, and he made it sound like I wanted Jeremy Grant, and they
Hmm.
made it happen. So thank them. I also find that this Portland offseason has been really interesting because they're not doing
The
what a
full
lot of
tank.
people kind of thought they should. Yeah, it's not even close to a full tank. It's not even a half rebuild. It's not really any of that. They're just
Yeah.
retooling their whole team besides Dame for the most part and
Hmm.
Nurkic. So you have to think that a lot of that is Dame's input. Like he is
Yeah.
choosing probably a lot of these guys. And I found it interesting too, and now in retrospect, he picked Shaden Sharp at number 7, right?
Yeah.
By all accounts, Shaden Sharp, and as much as I like him, one of the least ready guys in that upper echelon because of the lack of playing time. right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm really curious if Shaden Sharp was maybe like one of the very few like Dame Lillard was just like, yeah, you guys pick whoever you want during the draft. I don't really care, right? But I want a lot of input on the other guys we bring in and
Right.
sign. I'm interested if he's a trade piece. That's kind of what I'm getting at. If Shaden Sharp is like a later
Mm.
this season, they see what's going on. Like if this team is competing, and then what do they do with Shaden Sharp?
Yeah.
It's
Um.
just not the type of player that I think goes with all the contracts they've been handing
Mm-hmm.
out. Like they just paid Anthony Simons $100 million.
Yep.
Like that's a ton of money for a 22-year-old player. I think he's 22 or 23.
Mm-hmm.
And they're giving Nurkic contracts, this contract to Dame. This is a team that looks like they're trying to compete, is what I'm getting at. So,
Yeah.
what do you think?
I mean, it's a very interesting, topic and situation. I mean, they're going to be practically 44 million under the cap next year. Um, Actually, I think they're going to be 44 million under the cap. Practical cap space. They'll have 29 million. So I think that's the only thing that you can really do here is do a trade. The question is, who do you trade for? I know that there's been rumors of Durant. I'm not sure if that can be possible. But what I am excited about for basically the Blazers is the fact that you're going to have an interesting looking team. Obviously they like Anthony Simons. He was really young when they drafted him, and he's kind of grown and matured right before our very eyes. And so I'm excited to kind of see how he develops and kind of is that number two guy now. You have Jeremy Grant, who again is a good piece, good player. Obviously played really well in Denver. Kind of went to no man's land in Detroit back when they were rebuilding or they thought they had something there. They also signed Gary Payton the second. I'm curious to see how he plays in this. In
Too
this,
much money for him.
you think it's too much? Paid him 26
I,
mil.
I don't know, man. I just think it's like I like Gary Payton Jr. a lot. I think he was incredibly important to that title run, but man, that's a big contract for a guy that could not make a roster 6
Mm-hmm.
months ago, you know. And that's no shade at him. It's just like it could be one of those things like he literally was interviewing to be a video coordinator 6 months ago, and that's
Yeah.
it's just a tough transition for me to get into my head. Like now you're paying this guy $13 million a year, and there's only a few months of track record for this. I like the fit though. I do like the fit a lot. It's
Mm-hmm.
just I don't know. I would have been more happy doing like a big 1 year, try it out and see how it goes. See if
Yeah.
it's still consistent.
Yeah, but I think, like you said earlier, it's now that you pay Damian Lillard and he's 25% of your cap space. Anthony Simons is about 13%, and then you have Jeremy Grant who's 12%. I mean, the rest of the roster, you're gonna have to try to figure out to see if these are the guys on the bench and the role players that could get you to the promised land of getting. This is Chauncey Billups' project now. But what do they do to get themselves? Do they think that they're playoff contenders? Do they think that they're even top 8 contenders? That's my biggest question mark when it comes to the Blazers, because I think that they have obviously a starting five that's pretty decent, but then once you go to the bench, it gets a little shaky. I understand that's the way that it is, but I just don't know if I want to put that many mileage on Damian Lillard going forward in terms of making him play, close to 40 plus minutes.
Yeah. Like I mean, to me, this is one of those teams. Like they really, like I already said this. They stick out as a team that's like a trade coming for this team. Seems like they're gonna do like
Mm-hmm.
a trial run on the season and just see how it looks.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this team as one of those sneaky like who's actively being kind of talked about being moved, and what does Portland think about that player, right? I don't know, man. I think they have a lot of things they could throw into a package to get somebody too. I'd be very
Mm-hmm.
interested to see like what position it is that they think they need. Uh, I don't know. Like they could probably use a four, right? I don't know if their four spot is very good.
Well, I mean that'd be Jeremy Grant. You have Jeremy Grant
Yeah,
there.
I always think of him as kind of like a three, but a versatile. Like he switches between small and four.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. This is an interesting team, man. I actually I'm kind of weirdly convincing myself to enjoy what they've done. Like I like the idea behind a lot of the choices they've made. I'm just not sure how it's going to work out, but again, you have a guy like Dame, you might as well, like, you should do everything in your power to help this guy compete, especially if he's going to stay with you.
Mm-hmm.
That is at least your due diligence. Like, try and make it palatable for him to stay. He's
Mm-hmm.
doing it for you, and for that mega bag he's getting, not just for them. But
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see. So let us know in the comment section down below. What do you guys make of this Damian Lillard contract? Are you a fan of it? Are you not a fan of it? And if you're a Portland Trailblazers fan, what do you think is going to be the biggest X factor for you guys going into next season? I'm curious to know what you guys are thinking in the comment section down below.
we need to move over to James Harden, Bernie.
Yeah, yep. I was gonna say let's talk some James Harden, James Harden in the Garden.
This is one of the most surprising things to me this offseason.
Yeah, let me quickly read what
Yeah,
what
go for
happened.
it. Go
So,
for it.
according to Shams of The Athletic, James Harden plans to sign a 2-year deal with the 76ers with a player option for year 2. Harden opted out of his $47 million deal and will earn 32 in year 1 of his new deal as he reduced his salary by $15 million to help facilitate additional signings for the Sixers this offseason. The Sixers acquired Harden in February as part of the Ben Simmons trade. We all know that. So they obviously made huge sacrifices, or at least Harden did. And I think you and me are both surprised about that just because of who James Harden is. But I mean, what do we think? What's the
Yep.
move?
Right now this is where we're going to get into the phase of the podcast where people are probably going to hate everything I'm going to say. All right. I love this signing. We've long debated the 76ers for the last couple of years, like where their place is in the East.
Mm-hmm.
And me, I think like the track record will show. I've always rated them much higher than you. I think going into, I don't believe it was last season, but the season before, I had them ranked as my number one team in the East.
Yeah.
The year the Bucks won, I believe I had them second last season, and I'm very tempted to put them up in the top three again for myself. I
Mm-hmm.
really need to see like a couple more signings, but this is one of those signings where if you are a 76ers fan who's been hesitant about this Harden uh, time that you've had with Harden, you need to take a deep breath. And I think you need to start going back to trusting Daryl Morey just a little bit. Like I
Trust the
really do.
process.
I know he gets a lot of grief. He's kind of a goofy dude. He makes some
Mm-hmm.
weird choices that people don't always agree with, and he is kind of the analytical mastermind. In
Mm-hmm.
one sense, they signed PJ Tucker too, and they paid PJ Tucker way too much money considering he's 37 years old. I think I saw somewhere I saw what his contract is. I think he's going to be making like $10+ million when he's
Yep.
41.
Yep.
Um,
33 million contract.
it's way too much money, but they're not paying PJ Tucker for 3 years from now. They're paying PJ Tucker for this upcoming season and what they are trying to build. And I personally, this consideration with James Harden taking 15 million less dollars, I think you have to be excited, man. Like this is the type of thing that we have not seen James Harden do now for the past 3 seasons, right? Is actively going out of his way to make sacrifices for
Mm-hmm.
the greater good of the team he's on, you
Yeah.
know? And that is something I think a lot of people thought James Harden, including ourselves, Bernie. I got to the point where I didn't think he was capable of doing this either. I didn't think he would make a sacrifice, I guess, or do something that was maybe to his detriment for everybody else. But I feel like
Yeah.
this is what Daryl Morey's bet was from the beginning. He
Mm-hmm.
held on to this connection and relationship. He stuck his neck out on the line for James Harden through thick and thin because of the relationship they have. And this is where it pays off. You can make these convincing deals to somebody you're friends with, somebody where it's not all about the business, and put yourself in so much better of a position to compete. Because now, I mean, that is a lot of space to go get somebody valuable too. Even then, you think about the fact that they have Tobias Harris, his contract that they want to move to, and how
Mm,
much more space that would open. I would be concerned about the Sixers in a big move for somebody if I was another team. Like I would be on the lookout. Like, what is this team planning? You know, how did they convince Harden to take 15
mm.
million less? Like, what are the players that they're telling him and Embiid, like, this is who we want to go grab, you know?
I mean, I've talked about it before. I think that they could potentially go for Mitchell. I
Yeah.
think I
I
think
think I think so too.
I think really that's the only. I mean, there might be some other moves. Maybe you try to get Durant. That'd be very interesting. But
It'll be a weird team. I'd love it though.
it'd be weird. But like the fact that you have Durant, Embiid, and Harden, and you trade
And
Tobias Harris,
Maxi.
you'd probably have to get rid of Thibault, which would be the unfortunate part.
You'd have to get rid of
Um,
Maxi too.
and
I
Maxi,
think get either anybody Mitchell or higher in the pecking order of NBA stars, you're gonna have to give
yeah,
up Maxi.
yeah, I think so too. And so I'm curious to see in the future for this team, what is going to be the move. Obviously, I think Tobias Harris is gone. They haven't been impressed too much with him. I have not been impressed the last couple of years because every time in the playoffs, it seems that he has disappointed more times than
Disappeared,
not.
yeah.
And so that's the frustrating thing about it because he has all the talent to be a pretty good player, but just disappears at the wrong moment. So excuse me. As we kind of continue to kind of monitor the situation for the 76ers, I think what I'm most excited about them is trying to get another superstar with Joel Embiid and James Harden. Obviously, James Harden is not going to be the same James Harden that we had a couple years back. Houston James Harden, where he's scoring so much points. Obviously, the league has changed a little bit calls wise. You're not going to get any more of those Harden calls. And so I think that kind of him being a playmaking facilitator would be the best bet for him. And so I'm excited to see, what other player they can add to that roster because they definitely need to add somebody in order to be a championship contender. Because right now they're a solid team, but they're not a team where I'm excited or see them, in the Eastern Conference Finals at this current moment.
I don't know. I kind of do. I think like if some things kind of flip some of the I don't know, man. I don't think they were that much worse than some of the teams that made it far last season. You know, like I think the Celtics and the Bucks were clearly better than them. But besides that, I really don't think there was a lot of teams better than the Sixers. It was just like too much movement within the season. And let me ask you this question. This is the thing that I was
Mm-hmm.
wondering the most with this signing, right? With this contract.
Yeah.
Was it that they convinced James Harden? How do I rephrase this? Was it more about the fact that they were convincing him with that money they shaved off of his contract that they could go get somebody else? Or, and maybe it's a mix of both of these things, is it James Harden being convinced by the people around him that maybe he's in a new phase of his career, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you're a Sixers fan, if you're in general a James Harden fan, or just interested with these NBA superstars, like the psychology of these guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it's the case that it was the second one of those things, and he's realizing or being told and agreeing with the fact that, hey, maybe I am in a new stage of my career, and if I'm making
Mm-hmm.
$47 million to be the guy I am now, how does that look to everybody, right? I don't think there's a lot of players who have the ability to look inwardly like that. I would argue that I would have put him in probably the top three of like guys I didn't think had the ability to do that before this. I'm not sure it's changed. But
Mm-hmm.
he screamed a guy who just thinks he still had it, even though he clearly, to the eye test of everybody watching, did not have the same skill set, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that if you're to the point where you realize and you're accepting that and maybe changing some of your bad habits, right? I've seen a lot of clips of James Harden in the gym the last few
Mm-hmm.
weeks. I don't know if you have too. I've seen this man working out more in the last month than I have probably in the last 5 seasons. Um, like just a lot. And I don't just mean going in and working on his like one-legged jump shots. Like I mean like actually working out with Maxi and 76ers players, right?
Yeah.
This is guy like you're saying, he is much better suited to be a playmaking kind of floor general at this point in his career. And if he can maximize that part of his game, which we've seen at different points in his career where he can do that and he's putting up 11 assists a game almost at certain
Mm-hmm.
points. That is the perfect player for this team. A step
Yeah.
back three shooting, all handling, passing to Joel Embiid in the best position possible type of guy.
Yeah.
I keep saying it, but I think if you're a 76ers fan, you have to be excited. Like this new stage of Harden, this is what Brooklyn was probably praying they would get from this guy, you know?
Yeah.
Understand that you're the third best player of our big three and facilitate these dudes' skills as much as you possibly can with what you're good at.
Mm-hmm.
That's your court vision. Like you cannot get by people the way you used to. He's a step behind just about every time, in that playoffs that we witness. So
Mm-hmm.
I like it, man. I appreciate seeing guys do things like this in the league nowadays. Like I don't feel like this is as common as you would hope. You know what I mean? Like everybody's trying to get as much as they
Mm-hmm.
can, rightfully so in a lot of cases. Rightfully so. Get every
Yeah.
dollar you can from these owners and these teams. Why not? I do think there's some humility that is lacking in the league, and like somebody like Harden saying, you know what, I at one point was worthy of a 47 million a year contract, 47
Mm-hmm.
million dollar a year contract, and now
Yeah.
I'm more of a 32. There's value to that for teams, for team building, the
Yeah.
camaraderie of teams. Enough of my rant. What'd you think, Bernie? What's your final thoughts on this one?
I think that obviously it was a good thing for I think the Sixers organization that Harden, took that sacrifice. I think a lot of us, in the media, and I think everybody, thought of James Harden as a little bit selfish because of the way that not only the style of play that he had in Houston, and also but also kind of just the situation at hand when it came to him in terms of he's a guy that I've criticized a lot, and it's because of the fact that he kind of forced his way out of Houston, then forced his way out of the Nets, and it seems like all the time that he was just looking to be trying to find whatever situation best fits, what he wants. And again, in New York, it was, kind of before the whole vaccine mandate kind of went away. It was him just trying to, I feel like, be a party guy, kind of just want to, celebrate with his friends and family, and obviously rappers and owners. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's kind of where my thoughts went when it came to James Harden. But this is a step in the right direction, and we all remember when he finally worked out when he won his MVP award. And so for me, that's kind of what I'm noticing here is that he's finally hungry again and realizing, okay, this could be, one of the last times I get one of these big contracts. Not talking about this one right now, but the next one, right? Because I
Yep.
can see him just denying his player option and maybe trying to get one last big contract before, Father Time, taps him on the shoulder and says, "Hey, it's time to go home." Um,
Yeah.
and so I think that that's kind of where it's at, where he's thinking, okay, if I really buy into this playmaking, I could definitely, be a very key contributor to this 76ers team. The question now becomes, who do they get? Because obviously there's no one in free agency right now that's worth getting. They're obviously going to have to do a trade. You're going to have to trade away Tobias Harris or Matisse Thybulle or Tyrese Maxey, but in exchange, you could get a player that could help you get an NBA championship. And I think that's what they ultimately want. And I think that's what James Harden, in the final years of his career, wants to do. It seems like he's finally invested in, okay, this is now the time where I want to win a championship. And we'll see if it
Yep.
lasts more than a year. That's my kind of concern as someone that is skeptical of James Harden at times. Is this what he wants for the last couple years of his career, is to try to contend for a championship? Or is he going to be a guy that wants to, you know, be a party guy, go with Meek Mill, go with the owner of the 76ers, go with Robert Kraft, and not really try to want to win a championship? And I need to see that consistently. That's always been my concern when it comes to James Harden these last
Yeah.
couple of years.
His defense, I do think that 76ers owner, that Ruben, I think his name
Yeah.
was. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think he's the owner anymore.
Oh,
He sold.
interesting.
I think he sold the stake. He's the Fanatics guy, right? That's what you're
Yeah,
talking about. Yeah,
I
he
think so.
sold his stake in the Sixers.
Interesting.
Um, that being said, Let me go back to Harden one last time. I got one more thing I've been thinking about too is with all the stuff with the Nets, and how toxic that environment has been, and you look at how bad this collapse is for them, and all these people trying to get out of there. It really makes me wonder: was he just so sick of Brooklyn? Like, there's a clear history of, or I should say, like an oral history we could go through of what led him to the position he's in right now, right? Like, Houston was so bad, right? Their roster, what they had, there was no way he could compete on that team, right? And I'm not
Hmm.
saying that what he did to get out of there was right. I think it was like he sabotaged them in so many ways, like all the whole
He
franchise,
got
right?
fat.
Sabotaged, on purpose, and he really threw like a lot of games and effort out the window, right?
Right.
But you could see on paper at the stage of his career why he would want to get out of there so bad.
Hmm.
It was never going to pan out great. And he ends up in Brooklyn. And you look at how bad that situation was. I mean, every
Yeah.
report coming out of Brooklyn was how much he disliked being with Kyrie, right? I would argue we've seen now for the last year, like this dude was rightfully so wanting to get away from Kyrie. Like he was
But
probably misled into that situation.
the only pushback I'll give is I think, and was during the vaccine mandate, and again,
Huh?
this is not to get political, but Philadelphia was a little bit more open than New York at the time, and I just saw him as a guy that's like wants to party, wants to do his thing, and so at the time, I think he was just upset because New York was essentially closed.
So
Like,
you're saying it's less about Kyrie and more about just the fact he couldn't go do what he wanted
yeah,
to.
I think the lifestyle. I think he's a guy that just loves the lifestyle of,
Hmm.
if New York was what it was a couple years back, where it was nightclubs and fashion,
Sure.
Soho was open, like all that stuff. Then definitely see him as a guy that's like, okay, that this is where I want to go. This is I would stay in Brooklyn,
Sure,
but
very well. You might be totally right. I have no clue. I
that's
just
kind of
think
the
it's
only
it's
pushback I have.
interesting. It's just interesting to think like let's just say like on the timeline of him getting himself into shape, right? Let's just
Yeah.
go with that one perspective in mind, right? He gets fat in Houston to get out of there, to get dealt, right? It's to Brooklyn in the middle of the season with the expectation of,
Hmm.
hey, let me turn this around, right? And things obviously don't get turned around because of COVID and because of the situation within the Nets organization, right? The
Hmm.
fact that it was clear with the Kyrie situation and the vaccine mandate, like this team wasn't going to compete, right? That's
Right.
why I was so hard on saying this is not a championship contending team last season. I feel vindicated, but I just didn't think they were. Maybe James Harden felt the same. Maybe he felt like this is not the team where I go all out to get myself back in shape because, like you said, the summer of his MVP year, it was clear he was all in, focused in getting
Hmm.
his body in the right place, right?
Right.
Seems like just one of those dudes that he doesn't have it naturally, like the shape, the physique. Like he has to really work for it. So he
Hmm.
probably picks and chooses his spots more than most players do.
Yeah.
So I'm just interested to see, like, this is his first season in 3 years where we are going to see James Harden on one team. Think about that. One team, James Harden. This is going to be a team where he plays for them the whole year. The continuity of James Harden within this franchise is going to be much different than it was for Brooklyn, for Philly, even last season, right? He only played with them for a few months, and he was still out of shape James Harden, who had tried to get himself dealt from Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So I would just say people need to keep an eye out. Like, this is the one time we've seen this guy in a few years where he's going to have some consistency in his life, and he's trying to prove something. So, oh, I like this, man. I like seeing him take a bet on himself and take less money, like you said, to get a
Hmm.
big one last big one. I'm just gonna predict a good James Harden year. I feel like that's gonna be my spot this year. I think he's gonna have a good season. He's gonna have a
Good James
bounce
Harden
back.
here. Okay. Okay. I think that this is going to be, unless they get someone in, I think this is just going to stay the same as last year. Maybe they'll win one round in the playoffs, but then they'll get eliminated. But it all depends if they can get a trade for Tobias Harris, because I just think that you need someone else other than Tobias on that team. And I'm
Do you
curious
think they're better than the Hawks?
at this current moment, no.
Really? You think the Hawks are better than Sixers?
I think the Hawks are better just due to the fact
Wow.
of you have Joel Embiid injury history. That's one thing
True.
that has to go against him. You have James Harden, who, again, we'll see if he's committed this summer to staying in shape and working out. And, we'll look at his body physique as soon as training day photos are out. And, when the opening season is there to see if he's really about that. And I just think the Hawks added a really good piece in DeJounte Murray. I think that'll help Trae Young a lot. You still have John Collins, Clint Capella. They also could make a move as well. Maybe trading away John Collins to bring in another star player. And so that's going to be an interesting situation to kind of monitor when it comes to that. But at the end of the day, I think the 76ers just need to make that one trade, and I think that they could be beyond the Hawks.
Randall. Need Randall.
Julius Randle?
Go get Randall.
Go get Julius Randle and become a super team?
More self-serving. It's more self-serving than anything else. Get him out of New York. It's okay. They don't need Randall. I think they're better than Hawks are, personally. But we'll see. This is arguably one of the top 5 wait and see teams right now in the NBA. The Sixers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And people, let us know in the comment section down below, what do you guys make of the 76ers and James Harden and his contract extension? Do you think that the 76ers are going to be able to bring somebody in to help out this team? Or do you think that the 76ers are going to be stuck in no man's land by the time the season starts? Let us know in the comment section down below.